The floor did not vanish overnight. It went slowly, mill by mill, yard by yard, across 3 decades, until nothing remained but the buildings themselves. Empty shells, corrugated roofs bleeding rust, loading bays sealed with boards. By the early 1980s, Manchester alone carried an estimated 20 million square feet of abandoned industrial floor space. 20 million. Former cotton mills, former engine shops, former warehouses that had once routed the commerce of an empire. The machines had been stripped out. The workers had scattered. The purpose had dissolved. What remained was the space itself, and the dark, and the echo. And then, from somewhere inside that silence, someone turned on a synthesizer. And what those empty spaces would eventually become was acid house and rave culture, and one of the most unexpected cultural upheavals Britain had ever produced, born not from wealth or civic ambition or careful planning, but from the wreckage of everything that had come before. To understand that upheaval, you have to understand what it was built on. Britain's industrial collapse did not arrive in a single moment. It accumulated, year by year, through the 1960s and into the 1970s, as manufacturing shed jobs by the 100,000. Textile mills shuttered across Lancashire and Yorkshire. Metalworks closed across the Midlands. Dockyards fell quiet along the Thames and the Mersey. Communities that had organised their entire lives around the rhythm of a single factory found that rhythm cut without ceremony or explanation. By the time deindustrialisation pressed its full weight down in the early 1980s, entire towns faced a paradox no planner had anticipated. The infrastructure of production still stood. The production had simply stopped. Somebody would have to decide what to do with all that empty space. A generation of young people, many of them the children of the workers who had lost those jobs, would answer that question themselves. The music arrived from Chicago and Detroit, cities that shared Britain's industrial story almost note for note. House music and acid house had grown from the American urban deindustrialized experience, constructed on synthesizers and drum machines, on the Roland TB-303 bass unit with its strange, squelching electronic pulse, on the TR-808 and TR-909 drum machines that underpinned the rhythm, on a sound that felt mechanical and human at the same time. It crossed the Atlantic through record bags and word of mouth, but it passed through Ibiza first. In the summer of 1987, Danny Rampling, Paul Oakenfold, Nicky Holloway and Johnny Walker travelled to the island and encountered the Balearic sound being played by DJ Alfredo at Amnesia, a fluid, ecstatic collision of styles that reoriented everything they understood about music and what a dance floor could be. They brought it home, and it landed in London clubs later that year. Shoom opened in November of that year, Danny Rampling and his wife Jenny presiding over a room that quickly became something closer to a congregation than a crowd. Paul Oakenfold ran Future, then Spectrum. Nicky Holloway ran The Trip. They were club nights at first, bounded by licensing hours, by the architecture of legitimate venues, by the ordinary constraints of ordinary commerce. That would not last. From the outside, it looked like a club scene. Inside, it was already becoming something else entirely. Legal venues closed at 2 in the morning, and the demand refused to close with them. Britain's licensing laws were strict, and its abandoned warehouses were everywhere. The economics of an illegal rave demanded almost nothing except a building without a tenant, a sound system, a generator, and the knowledge of where to arrive. Promoters began to notice that the old industrial estates on the edge of every post-industrial town held exactly what they needed. No landlord, no neighbours with noise complaints lodged at the council, no fixed address to which police could be directed in advance. Some of those promoters, wearing business suits to persuade security patrols that their presence carried authority, would quietly occupy a space that commerce had abandoned and transform it in a single night into something commerce had never conceived. The group, Genesis 88, operating across London and the wider Orbital motorway network, found empty warehouses in the old rag trade districts of Hackney and Curtain Road, in the former commercial zones of Chelsea and Wembley, and installed professional lighting rigs and sound systems in buildings that still carried the atmosphere of the industry that had vacated them. Tens of thousands of people would receive a phone number, call it for a rendezvous point, travel in convoy through the night, and arrive at a venue they had never seen, which would cease to exist by morning. To the north, Blackburn offered its abandoned mills and disused factories to a scene already pushing outward under pressure from police operations in Manchester and London. By 1988 and 1989, the town had become a destination in its own right. One gathering in September 1989 drew more than 10,000 people to an all-night rave in the hills above the town. The Sunrise promotions, run by Tony Colston-Hayter and Roger Goodman, regularly drew 20,000 or more to a single warehouse party. The M25 Orbital motorway, opened in 1986, and still new enough to carry a sense of the future, connected cities to fields and fields to warehouse estates in a circuit that an entire generation named as their own. The band Orbital took their name from it. Threading through all of it, in Manchester, stood one building that carried both stories at once. The Hacienda had opened in 1982 inside a converted yacht warehouse on Whitworth Street West, backed by Factory Records and the members of New Order, who fed the proceeds of their music into a venue that hemorrhaged money with such consistency that Peter Hook later observed it had probably done more for drug dealers than for the band that owned it. Factory Records had been built by Tony Wilson, television presenter, cultural provocateur, the man who signed Joy Division and then New Order, who believed so completely in the music coming out of Manchester that he poured the label's money into a venue that almost no one believed would survive. A place where boats had once been built became a place where a city rediscovered itself. By the late 1980s, under the residencies of Mike Pickering, later of M. People and Graham Park, it functioned as the cathedral of the Manchester acid house scene, still working, still drawing, still burning through cash it could not recover. Factory Records collapsed in 1992. The Hacienda closed in 1997, after cumulative losses estimated between £6 and £9 million, and after years in which crime and disorder had settled over the building like a second tenancy. Then came the law. Parliament had been watching. The entertainments. Increased Penalties Act of 1990 raised fines for unlicensed events to £20,000 and extended potential custodial sentences. But the scene adapted, spreading further out, further underground, further into the fields. Castlemorton Common in 1992 brought between 30,000 and 40,000 people to a week-long free party gathering in Worcestershire, with the sound system Spiral Tribe at its centre, the convoy that had converged from across Britain onto a stretch of common land in the Malvern Hills and refused for 7 days to leave. The political response arrived swiftly and in full. The Criminal Justice and Public Order Act passed into law in November 1994, drafted with language so precise that it targeted music wholly or predominantly characterized by the omission of a succession of repetitive beats. The state had written a legal definition of a music genre in order to prohibit it. Academic commentators noted that the wording was poorly constructed, that it had emerged from something resembling a moral panic, that it was, in one reading, simply bizarre. The Act handed police the power to disperse persons preparing for a rave, still working, still present, still gathering, until suddenly they were not permitted to be. The scene did not die. It moved. It relocated into licensed superclubs, into legal venues with bouncers and ticket desks and 3 o'clock closing times. The tax followed. The regulation followed. And out of the wreckage of the illegal warehouse years, a chain of new genres emerged, still British, still carrying the genetic code of empty industrial space, crossed with Chicago synthesizers and Detroit techno. Still working, still trusted, still global. Drum and bass, jungle, UK garage, hardcore, exported everywhere, claimed everywhere, credited to Britain the way cotton once was. When the Hacienda was demolished, its dance floor was broken up for parts. Peter Hook had 6 bass guitars built from the planks. They carry stiletto marks and cigarette burns from the years the floor held people. The site is apartments now. What the factories produced, the world consumed. What the factories left behind, a generation converted into something the factories could never have imagined. The buildings are gone. The music is still everywhere.